Movies that focus on folklore have the possibility to be intriguing, captivating, even disturbing. So when I heard about the Irish folk horror Unwelcome, I was intrigued. It's coming to theaters and then VOD, but is it even worth watching? Married couple Maya and Jamie escape their urban nightmare to the tranquility of rural Ireland, only to discover malevolent and murderous goblins lurking in the gnarled, ancient wood at the foot of their new garden. So this is a weird mix of a movie. It starts off with a pretty violent and unsettling scenario that then creates the impetus for our main characters to move to a rural location in Ireland. Hannah John-Kamen and Douglas Booth star as Maya and Jamie respectively. And they're the married couple who have to navigate not only their new surroundings, but also the very cagey behaviors of the villagers. And their property, it backs up to a wooded area, and at the gate that separates the woods from their garden, there's a hole in the wall where the couple is informed that every day they need to place some sort of bloody meat as a sort of sacrifice to the redcaps. Now, these are the creatures that live in the wood who apparently are malevolent. I love the idea of this lore, this ever-present looming threat that resides just outside the family's property. But then the problem is that lore, it's never fully explained. The villagers know about the threat and the true importance of the daily meat sacrifice, but they never inform in detail the importance to either Maya or Jamie. And this would then give them motivation to actually carry out the task. Plus, it would then give us as the audience a ton of context as to who or what the redcaps are. And this becomes even more important as the story goes along. There's a point where actions are carried out, and because we have no background, the sequences are less than impactful, and they just come across as vaguely strange. In addition to the two leads, there are a few other recognizable faces in the cast, like Colm Meaney and Jamie Lee O'Donnell from Derry Girls, and then even Christian Nairn, who you'll recognize as Hodor from Game of Thrones. I mean, they make up this antagonistic family that creates all sorts of chaos and issues for Maya and Jamie. Now, I'm all for the antagonism that they create, but some of the character arcs, they just don't make a ton of sense in how they're carried out. Take Christian Nairn, for example. For a lot of this, he's shown to be a hulking, creepy presence who doesn't speak, but then lurks and peeps on the family. And we get the sense that he's quite dim and slow. But then there's this scene where he has a conversation with Maya, and in this moment, he's articulate, well-spoken, and has a vocabulary that shows he's not slow or dumb, just quiet. And then we watch his personality switch on a dime. And then it becomes something out of character for what we've seen previously. Now, I know the story does this so that some other actions can take place. But for me, had the story chosen to use the other brother in the family, who's already then been shown to be a terrible human, who just steals and he's just a massive punk, that would have then made more sense and felt more in line with character personalities. The settings that are used in this are odd and at times make what we're seeing come across like we're in a fairy tale. When the garden of the house is shown, the lighting, coloring, even shrubbery, it all appears fake, like it's taking place on a stage. And because of this, it does have a more story feel to it than real life. But then for everything else, the woods, the house, the village, everything is shot with real locations. So that dichotomy that's created, it's puzzling, and it actually broke me out of the story sometimes. Now, this is directed by John Wright, and while that name may not mean anything to you, I was excited to check this out because he also directed a very odd and quirky Irish sci-fi horror called Grabbers. Now, if you've not seen that, it is certainly worth a watch, especially because the premise is just so unique. Here, Wright also brings some quirkiness to the story, especially when we get to the portion that involves the redcaps. Now, at first, we're barely shown anything visually from them. We may see the back of a head or a shadow that's quickly moving out of sight. And these all work to create an atmosphere that's a bit creepy and mysterious. But then we get to see all of the redcaps, and this is when it starts to go off the rails. Now, the practical effects are outstanding. The redcaps are these goblin-looking things. They're small and kind of greenish-brown with pointy ears and teeth. And they also like sharp daggers so they can get all stabby with people. But by showing these, all the mystique is then removed, and that atmosphere of dread is broken, creating almost a laughable tone to the last third of the movie. Now, the redcaps make noises that sound kind of like speaking. It's also like an Ewok chattering after it ingests some coke. There are words here and there that might be real words, but mostly it's just gibberish. And when these appear on screen, all heck breaks loose, and the violence, it becomes quite visceral. But it's also executed in a way that made me laugh out loud, destroying any sense of anxiety or distress. And the mix of tones was confusing, and it worked against what I think the movie was trying to accomplish. When the movie gets to the end, it's kind of like a WTF moment. There are actions that could be creepy and even distressing, but because a lot of the lore was never established well, the end feels misplaced, and it doesn't create an atmosphere other than, huh? And the movie thrives when it's sticking to the less is more in the visual area. And I don't think less is more with the folklore portion, but if this movie wanted to maintain just a darker tone that's ominous and foreboding, not showing the red caps in their entirety, it just would have been a better move. This is relatively short at an hour and 44 minutes, but I do think that it could have been trimmed down a bit even more just based on what we get. Scenarios are introduced that are meant to increase a creep factor, but they end up going nowhere, feeling more useless than anything. And some of the cinematography is a lot of fun, taking advantage of the dark forest with a passageway that's just lined with trees. I mean, there's a huge sense of loneliness and dread that's created as characters enter the wood, and then the camera helps to accentuate the isolation and the danger that could accompany the remoteness. The use of color, it's also very effective in setting the moods. When we have those scenes that feel like they're on a stage, as I'd mentioned before, the colors are way more vibrant, capturing deep and bright greens of grass and bushes. I mean, the sky, it's almost alive with its unnatural brightness. And then even the characters themselves seem to pop more off the screen in these moments, giving a sense of fakeness that would make them feel right at home in a fairy tale story. So overall, the movie's a mixed bag for me. I like the concept, and I love it when barely any of the red caps are shown, creating way more menace by going unseen than when they fully appear on screen. The folklore is intriguing, but it isn't explained enough to create a true sense of terror or dread. And when we get to the climax, everything seems to go off the rails and descend into ridiculousness rather than anything scary or unsettling. Also, some of the character decisions feel more forced and out of place, again creating more of a sense of absurdity than anything ominous or threatening. I think this is a fine watch for a streaming platform, but I wouldn't recommend dropping the cash to see it in the theater or really even on demand. The story becomes lackluster despite having an intriguing premise and setup. There's not really any sex, no nudity, a lot of profanity, and then a ton of violence. I give Unwelcome 2.5 out of 5 couches. So are there any movies that focus on folklore that you really enjoy and could recommend to me? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.